lot of people these days, you know, you buy a house, it's a competitive market. So you come in and you think, oh, we can do that, we can do that, we can do that. And that's what happened with this house. It was all popcorn from 1986. And it never removed popcorn, but you know, we really wanted the house and it couldn't be that hard, right? So I do like I always do, watch a YouTube video or two and then just jump right into it. So some of the YouTube videos were giving me bad information in retrospect. And so in this video, I want to talk about the theory of removing it, like what do you actually do? The tools that I found most useful, the variables involved. There's 3 main variables, and some of the mistakes that I made, including ending up in the emergency room. So the theory or the method of removing popcorn is way easier than I thought. In fact, I was so excited when, you know, the first thing I did after closing was come to the house and spray popcorn and remove some. I was like, oh, I can do it. And it did remain easy for the most part. As you'll see in the variable section, there are some times where it's a lot harder. But basically popcorn is very thick and it's very liquid absorbent. So if it gets wet, it soaks in all that moisture, and then you can even soak it again. And so basically all you're doing is turning this dry, crunchy, ugly, nasty texturing, turning it super wet, and then just taking a putty knife and just scraping it off. And as you can see here, you want it just to be smooth. What it sounds like when you really hit the sweet spot, it's just like just a whoosh sound, and it falls straight down really hard to the ground. So that's all there is theoretically to doing the job. It doesn't require a lot of amazing skills, but that's basically all you're trying to do. So tools, the first thing is a putty knife. And one video I saw said, get the biggest putty knife you can, then it'll go faster. So I did, as you'll see in these videos, most of what I did was with a 12-inch putty knife. This is a 6-inch. And I didn't texture the ceilings. I basically removed the popcorn and then had a really great texture guy come finish the ceilings and do texture. You know, so the DIY project was just about saving thousands of dollars in labor, because it's took a while. It's a huge mess. But anyway, so a lot of what I did was with the 12-inch, but when I saw the pros come in and do one part I couldn't reach, the cathedral ceiling, then he was using this size and said the problem with the big one is that it's so long that you're going to get imperfections, basically, because it's not perfectly flat. And so obviously the smaller the putty knife, the more accurate it's going to be for each one. So anyway, you get the knife, and I did see in a video to sand off the edges, because you're going to be working with some, you know, wet ceiling material, and it keeps you from cutting it. So there's that. Then I found this product on Amazon, and it's basically, because this does not hook into an extension pole, and you know, a lot of these are really tall. This is just something you put here, and then you get your extension pole, and now you can go to really high ceilings without having to work completely on ladders. And then finally, some way to blow some water onto the ceiling. So just a normal, you know, home sprayer. And also at one point in my enthusiasm, I did try a pressure washer, which made a massive mess. So those are the tools you'll need. That's really it. It's a low cost project, but it's obviously high labor. It's 3 main variables to consider when you're doing the popcorn. The first and most obvious has to do with asbestos. So asbestos is a harmful chemical that can cause lung cancer and other lung problems that was used extensively in popcorn ceilings through the 60s and 70s. And in the late 70s, it was actually banned in the US. However, they didn't ban the use of the stockpiles of the texture. So you will read online that some houses, even in the early 90s that have popcorn, have asbestos in them. So I don't know. I looked and it's from 86, like I said, so I just sort of assumed it didn't have asbestos. You could theoretically take a little bit of it and you can send it in a pack. So it's like $25. You have to mail it. You can get them at Lowe's or Home Depot. You mail it and then they basically tell you if it has asbestos. So if you had a house in the 70s and 60s, you might just assume it, and it just creates a whole new level of difficulty in the job because you have to have protective gear and this kind of thing. So if you're doing it yourself, that might be a way to consider that you don't want to do it yourself. So that's the first variable. The second variable, and this is huge, is whether the popcorn is painted or not painted. So you may get into a house and you're like, well, we can paint it and always remove it later. So don't do that. Unpainted popcorn is like 10 times easier to remove than painted popcorn. So luckily, I didn't know that until I got to the one room in this house that was painted, and that was the master. And instead of my nice, it was like, and it was horrible. It took so long to remove it, and it was the nastiest ceiling. And here's some clips from that. All right, so now we come to the hardest kind of popcorn to remove. And that is gonna be popcorn that has been painted on. So this is basically, latex is mostly waterproof. It just forms a rubber coating over the entire ceiling. And I didn't even know that this room was painted, but it was really obvious when you started because it is 10 times harder. But I've done most of the room. I saved one little section here for the video. And basically, if the whole house had been painted popcorn, I probably couldn't have done it. But it's just this one small room. And so what I found is that you have to basically scrape it, spray it, scrape it, spray it. Just find some other job to do because you're just gonna have 20-minute intervals of waiting. So I've sprayed this with a little bit different thing, which is hot water and vinegar, 10 to 20% vinegar. So it's really, really strong. And that helps to break down. So I sprayed this with the hot water and vinegar. And so I'm gonna do a first pass, and as you'll see, it's not gonna come flying off like the popcorn has been flying off. It's gonna be a crunchy sound, and I'm just gonna try to just start breaking down the paint. You can hear some of it's coming off, but not in big chunks. Okay, and then the third variable, and this doesn't apply to most houses, is whether the popcorn is on concrete or whether it is on drywall. So the vast majority obviously is going to be on drywall. I did have a whole garage that was concrete ceiling and then a little entryway. So that was actually a good place to kind of get the feel for removing popcorn because there's not as much risk to damaging the drywall. So those are the three variables. So some of the huge mistakes I made, I would say the number one, because I didn't understand how drywall ceilings work, was I was messing up the tape lines at the corners. So basically, you can go all along, but the perimeter of a ceiling has tape that connects the ceiling to the wall. It's like a folded piece of paper. So picture like this is tape that's connecting the ceiling to the wall and you've got all this popcorn up here and you come, basically what happens is you're gonna rip this tape off. So whenever you get to the corners, what I do is drywall right up to this point once I figured it out. And then you're gonna drywall the top like this. So that'll keep you from having a lot of tape damage, which again requires sometimes retaping. But again, I had a great guy doing my texturing who I've used before, but that kind of added to it. The second thing has to do with, the second mistake has to do with the messiness of popcorn. It is ridiculous. So if it gets on anything, it's pretty much immovable. So I had a room with some laminate flooring that we were maybe gonna save, maybe not. But I was like, oh, well, we'll just put the popcorn and it'll fall on the floor. And then once it dries, I'll sweep it up. And it basically, it's like concrete when it gets on something. So you have to have a plan for collecting the popcorn. You'll see products available that have like a big, like a square with a bag in it, and you're basically going into the bag. But popcorn itself isn't heavy, but when you're putting gallons and gallons of water on it, then it becomes very heavy. So what I did was basically buy the biggest tarp that I could buy at Walmart, and I put that underneath it, and I would do large sections, and then I would just let it dry overnight, and then I would fold it up. If you are doing, if you're doing popcorn in a house that's already, the floor's already done, then it makes it so much harder, because if you had carpet, you have to, I guess what the pros do is they plastic coat the entire house. So popcorn tends to just fall straight down. So if you're scraping, it's not going to be like throwing it into walls. It'll be like that. But you know, you still do get some on the walls. And the third thing has to do with safety. So like I said, I ended up in the emergency room, and the same day there was another guy who was in the emergency room. Both of us got cut by this, the putty knife. Oh, I thought it was dull. That's actually super sharp. So what happened to that guy was he had it on a ladder, and it came and gave him a laceration there. What happened to me was it was right after the spraying with the pressure washer sequence, and everything was soaking wet, and there was popcorn all over the floor. So I didn't want to keep wearing, you know, my shoes. So I basically had my feet slipped into my shoes, and I was just like trying to hurry, and I was super tired, and I was moving the ladder. So I put my putty knife up to hold on the ladder, and I fell, and I went and basically cut this whole section. Was like an inch deep. It was really bad. I was kind of a baby about it, but it did heal perfectly. It changed my handwriting forever, but totally worth it. Woo! So I'm done. It took me about 3 weeks off and on for these ceilings. So anyways, the finished product was just shocking. And again, I did the popcorn, and then I had the pros come in and do the texturing, and the difference was just like completely night and day. It was probably the most profound thing that we did in remodeling this house. So I definitely recommend it. Before we moved into this one, we were renting between houses, and that condo had all popcorn, and it was really, it just bugged me. I can't stand it. So I'm glad I invested the time and money into doing the popcorn. And when I was just the process, I did my own painting, and it was just like, so it was a very fulfilling job. So anyway, that's my popcorn video, and hope you learned something from it. It's both simple and hard at the same time, but I personally met multiple people that are interested in doing it, because they're like me. You know, you rush into a house, and then you're like, oh, you got to get down to the hard work. So it's not actually hard to do it yourself, and good luck.